Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And in today's range report, we're going to be taking a look at what might be one of the most beloved and collected rifles in the United States. In the gun world, typically we have two camps. You have your AR guys and your AK guys. But there's a third type of gun owner that I don't think gets talked about too much. The M1 Carbine guys. And let me tell you, through my travels in the Second Amendment, I have discovered a number of people that collect the M1 Carbine. And they are passionate about this rifle, and they like to learn and know everything there is to know about this weapons platform, and they make sure to let everyone else know they know it too. In this video, I'm going to do my best to give you as much information as I can, but I know inevitably I am going to leave something out, or I might get something a little bit wrong. So before we start this video, I have to apologize to all of the M1 Carbine lovers out there. This definitely is a great weapon, and there's just so much information out there and a lot of myths and legends about it that I can't promise I'm going to get everything right. Now, as I mentioned, this is a beloved weapons platform. In fact, the M1 Carbine is the most produced weapon prior to the AR-15 or the M16. There were more of these made than any other small arm in U.S. history, including the 1911 pistol. This gun was designed by David Marshall Williams, sometimes known as Carbine Williams, and a team at Winchester. And even though the gun itself looks like a carbine version of the M1 Garand or the Garand, the two rifles actually have nothing to do with each other. Outwardly, as I said, aesthetically, they kind of look the same. But on July the 1st, 1925, the United States military changed their naming conventions when it comes to small arms. And the M denotes model, but then they went in consecutive order on whether it was a carbine, submachine gun, rifle, or the like. So you have the M1 submachine gun, the M1 rifle, and this was the M1 Carbine. It's chambered in .30 carbine, which is a cartridge that also was designed by Winchester. Its primary philosophy of use was to give troops that were not on the front line more firepower than a 1911, but put it in a light and compact package. Give them something that would give them more firepower, better than a pistol, but not needing something as big, heavy, bulky, and powerful as an M1 Garand. So that's what this gun is all about. And I have never shot one. I've always wanted one for my collection, so I can't wait to get this to the range and shoot it. But before we get to the range and talk about all the things that I like and don't like, as always, I want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this really cool and historic rifle. His name is Jack. He's a local fan and subscriber. In fact, he's the second person named Jack that lends guns to the channel. So thank you so much, Jack. And everybody, I affectionately call him Jack number 2, not to confuse him with the original Jack. I always want to thank my Patreon supporters, because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here, and I couldn't make these videos without them. And if you guys want to join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month and get to see all of these videos early, there's a link in the description below. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor, who always provides all of the ammunition for these range reports and thus makes them financially feasible for me, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And as I always say when I'm making a review on a gun like this, made of steel and wood, I always remind you, you probably have a love affair with pistols that are made the same way. Maybe you own a 1911, a Browning High Power, or a CZ75, and you're looking for a set of customized wood grips to make your gun one of a kind and unique. Well, I have the perfect grip company for you. Brownworks. Brownworks is a custom grip company making a wide variety of grips for a wide variety of firearms out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials. Mark is an artist and he is a craftsman. Anything you can imagine that can be done with wood, Mark can make it. He can apply custom logos, custom engravings, custom textures, finish these grips in a wide variety of colors, as well as apply exotic materials like snakeskin and alligator skin to make your grips unique and one of a kind. design. He also can create his own laminate woods. Anything you can imagine, he can make. So I'm going to put a link to his website in the comment section below, as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. And I'm going to ask you to go over there and check out everything he has to offer. And when you place that first order for your set of custom grips, please tell Mark the Texas Gun Vault sent you. All right, so once again, let's talk about the really cool and historic gun we have on the table today, the M1 Carbine. This one was made by IBM. Yes, International Business Machines. There were over 10 companies that made M1 carbines during the war, and some of them also included Rockola, the maker of jukeboxes, and National Postal Meter, amongst many others, and other gun manufacturers. The philosophy of use of this firearm, as I mentioned, was to give troops that were not on the front lines more firepower than a 1911 pistol. Allow them, in case they got into combat, to have something that was more substantial and they could reach out to further distances more accurately. It does look like the M1 Garand, but as I mentioned earlier, it really has nothing to do with that rifle. It looks the same, it's made of wood, it has a very similar manual of arms, but it's not chambered in the same cartridge and it's not the same rifle. In fact, in some ways, this kind of is the first assault rifle of the United States military. And some people are going to disagree with me on that, but this gun is chambered in an intermediate cartridge, the .30 carbine. And even though most of them were in the M1 configuration, meaning this is just a semi-automatic gun, they also had an M2, which was select fire. So although it doesn't look like an M4 carbine of today, in many ways it filled the same role. As I also mentioned, this was the most produced small arm before the M16. And honestly, that is hard to believe. There are so many guns that were made before this. And this gun beats them all with over 6 million made. The United States used these all the way from World War II through the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and it was also used in the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. These have found their ways in the militaries and the police forces around the world and are still found in armed conflicts today. One more thing that is really interesting about this gun is the M1 Carbine changed the National Firearms Act. Back in 1934, when the NFA was introduced, the barrel length of both shotguns and rifles were limited to 18 inches. But when these hit the surplus market, well, they don't have 18-inch barrels. They have 16-inch barrels, and they amended the National Firearms Act because there were so many of these in circulation, they didn't want citizens getting in trouble, either bringing these back as trophies or them being sold on the civilian market. So they amended the National Firearms Act to give us the 16-inch barrel length instead of the 18-inch barrel length. And I find that to be absolutely fascinating, that this gun actually changed the NFA, and is why shotguns are limited to 18 and rifles are limited to 16. And as I said, I know I left something out and people will correct me in the comments section below. And I'm here to learn from you as much as you are from me. So please add all of the other interesting information about these guns that you want in the comments section. But before we get to the range and I get a chance to shoot this and see what it's all about, I always want to talk about the things that I like and don't like, and I always want to start with the positive first. The first thing I absolutely love about this gun as a collector is its history. I've already told you so much information about this gun, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. I love how passionate collectors are about this gun. They want to collect every manufacturer, every configuration of it. The passion around this gun is incredible. And for me, that's the kind of stuff I absolutely love. I love to geek out about guns. I love to learn about the history of guns, and this one just has such a storied past. You can go on forever, and there are books written about it. There's just so much to learn, and I love getting all of that information and just trying to absorb it and appreciate this gun's history. I also like the fact this gun is chambered in an intermediate cartridge, and I think that honestly is another reason why this gun is so beloved. The M1 Garand is a big, heavy rifle, and it was designed for the guys at the front. This is just a fun gun that can be used for intermediate distance engagements. It can be used for CQB. It can be used for personal defense. It's just that right size. It's not too powerful, but it's definitely not weak. And the .30 carbine I kind of look at as the granddad to the .223 that we have today. Not in direct lineage, but in the philosophy of what the cartridge was designed for. Another thing I love about this gun, in fact, something that I think makes it better than the M1 Garand, is that it is magazine fed, and you can remove these magazines. In fact, I always felt that one of the big design flaws of the M1 Garand was the fact it fed from an internal magazine. I understand why it was designed that way in the time it was, but let's be honest, in this time in World War II, warfare was changing, and the ability to put as many rounds downrange as possible meant that you could win your battle and save your buddies' lives. And having a gun that has an interchangeable magazine really sped up this process. And that is a big advantage to this. And I really feel like this design is superior to the M1 Garand in that way. The last thing I really like about this gun is the trigger. Now, this is not a target trigger. It's not a modern trigger. But for the type of gun this is used for military service, this trigger is pretty darn good. And everyone says it gives you a good amount of accuracy. So I want to adjust the camera. I want to get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge, and I want to see what this trigger is all about. So let me do that now. So let's take a look at the trigger in this M1 carbine made by IBM. Of course, we'll start by dropping the magazine, ensuring there is no ammunition in it, and then we will safety check the gun, visually inspect the chamber, make sure there is nothing in there, and it looks like we are clear. Let's start off by showing you what the trigger pull looks like. It has just a little bit of a take up. You do hit a wall, but when it breaks, the trigger will move quite a bit, but it's not bad. Now let me show you the reset. It's relatively short, and when you hear that click, you're right back at the wall. That trigger feels pretty good for a gun of this type, and it's vintage. All right, so let's get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge and see what this trigger pulls at. Let me clear the averages, and let's find out. 5 pounds, 3.3 ounces. £5 pounds, 6.4 ounces. £5 pounds, 6.0 ounces. 5 pounds, 4.1 ounces, and finally 5 pounds, 3.0 ounces, which gives us an average of 5 pounds, 4.6 ounces. And that's right in the sweet spot for a gun like this and its philosophy of use. It feels really, really good. And hopefully that's going to translate into a very positive shooting experience at the range. Now, at this point in the range report, I usually talk about things about the guns that I don't like. And as the gun sits here on the workbench, I can't find anything about it that I don't like. It's just a really, really cool gun. Seems to be well designed, robust, and pretty awesome. So let's just go ahead and get this to the range, and I'm going to put my first rounds through an M1 carbine ever. So as always, when it comes to rifles, I'm going to start at just 10 yards. I just want to see what this gun shoots like, make sure it's reliable. And because this gun was designed to replace the 1911 in service, I'm just going to shoot this at a 25-yard range. It was designed for closer up engagements, not trying to make shots at 200 yards. So that's just how I'm going to review it. So let's go to the range, 10 yards, 1 magazine, and let's see what this M1 carbine is all about. And before we can talk about how the gun shoots, I want to talk about the magazines, because as you saw when I first loaded this rifle, I had to almost force the bolt closed. And that's because I have two types of magazines for this range report. I have standard GI magazines, and I have new manufactured ones, and I believe these are from South Korea. And the ones from South Korea, of course, are going to have a little bit better springs than the old ones. These can get worn out over time, and the original philosophy of use of the GI magazines were to be disposable in the battlefield. They're not known to be the most reliable and durable over time. The newly manufactured ones, of course, have brand new springs in them, but the followers are also made a little bit different, so when you pull the bolt back on an empty magazine, it actually locks open. That's not the way they were originally designed, or the guns were originally designed. So if you have a GI mag and you go empty, the bolt is just going to close. Some people are going to like this, some people aren't. It's a nice indication and kind of modernizing the gun a little bit, but these are brand new fresh magazines. So I had one of these loaded. I was using the more current production ones, and that first round was in there really tight, and so I had to close the bolt. But that's not a problem with the gun or the original GI magazines. A lot of people will spend a lot of money trying to find the originals because they say they work better. But for me, this magazine fed just fine. We just had to, almost in a way, push charge that first round. Now let's talk about how this gun shot. It actually shot really nice. It has a very low recoil impulse. It has a little bit more muzzle rise than I was expecting though, but this thing feels great, and I can see why so many people love this gun and why so many people would look at this gun beyond just a self-defense role, but as a sporting role. Intermediate cartridges are awesome at all these kind of shorter distances. They're a lot of fun to shoot. They're not overpowering. And I really feel like people that are of smaller stature and women would really love a gun about this length, size, weight, and power. It's a lot of fun to shoot. All right, so now let's add some distance to this target. I'm just going to go out 5 more yards, see what happens to this group, and I'm going to go for the head on this IDPA silhouette. So let's go back to the range, put another magazine through this, and see if there's anything about this gun that I discover that I like or don't like, and I'll report back to you. And the gun's shooting okay for me when it comes to accuracy, but I can tell you, maybe it's that I'm getting a little bit older. These iron sights aren't the best in the world, but they do have a lot of adjustments, and they can be easily adjusted, and that's what I'm going to do because I am shooting a little bit to the right at 15 yards. But so far, my shooting experience is exactly the same as it was at 10 yards. So now let's go out to 20 yards. Let me do a little bit of adjusting with these sights, and let's see if I can get this group any better. And that group is definitely a little bit better, but I sure wish I had more time and ammunition to practice and see if I can really dial in these sights. These are still pretty much my first shots with an M1 carbine ever, so I think it has good practical and duty accuracy, but for me right now it's not a tack driver, but I can definitely see where with enough time and effort it really could be. But now I want to see what the best group I can shoot with this rifle is, and I want to put out the target at 25 yards and try to take as much of the human element out of the equation as possible and shoot this from a bench. So let me load up another magazine, let's go back to the range and see what the best I can do shooting from a barrier is. And when you really shoot this rifle slow and take your time, I think you can get a good group pretty easy. And I can see how the easy manual of arms is great with this rifle, especially if you're not somebody that's having to train all the time. And I can see the big advantage of putting this rifle in many of the backline troops' hands. You get more power and range than a 1911, and it's easy to use, easy to shoot, and easy to aim. I'm really enjoying this rifle. Now the next test I want to do is the hollow point test. Now normally at the range I show you what type of ammunition I'm running through this, and I forgot to show it, but I'm going to show it to you now. I'm going to be using the 30 carbine Hornady Critical Defense 110 grain in this next range footage. And some people have told me that the M1 carbine sometimes does not like hollow points because when it feeds from the magazine, typically the front of the projectile hits the top of the chamber. But I'm curious if hollow points are going to run in this, and I hope that they do. So let's go to the range and find out. And I'm glad to see it ran just fine because, as I said, a lot of people say some of these can run hollow points, some of them can't. And if you want to buy this and use modern ammunition, you definitely want one that can. Now the next test I want to do is another defensive use. Essentially I want to see how fast I can shoot this gun, can I keep it on target, and how fast I can change out the magazine. I mentioned earlier in this video one of the big advantages to this design is you can drop the magazine, insert a new one, unlike the M1 Garand, which you have to use a stripper clip loaded from the top, and that can be a little bit time consuming. So hopefully I can shoot this fast and get this gun back in action. But this gun's manual of arms is a little bit different than other rifles, and sometimes it takes a little bit to kind of figure it out, and these magazines aren't the easiest to insert into this receiver. I just don't have a lot of experience shooting an M1 carbine, but if I can do this relatively fast, and this being my first shooting experience with this gun, I'm pretty sure almost everybody else could do it too. So let's go to the range, let's see how fast I can shoot it and how fast I can change this magazine out. And I guess I can shoot this gun kind of fast, but in groups, because it's really hard to get a good rhythm with. It also has a little bit more muzzle rise than I was expecting, and I mentioned that earlier in the range report. So I felt like when you're shooting this fast, I couldn't keep as many rounds on target or put them where I wanted them to. The other thing that was really difficult was the magazine change, and it's probably just because I'm not used to it. I'm used to more modern designs, but this is definitely, in my opinion, a better system than the M1 Garand, and I can see why a lot of troops during World War II would have preferred this system over the M1 Garand. It's really nice just to push a button, the magazine drop out, and you reinsert a new one, and you are ready to go. But it's just a system that I would have to get used to. It's a little bit different manual of arms than I'm normally used to using. But now let's talk about the pros and cons of this gun and my final thoughts. This is a really, really cool gun. It's super historic, and I can see the huge appeal of this gun. It's just the right size. It's well balanced. It's in a really cool cartridge. It's a lot of fun to shoot. The big pros to this is that it's really historical, and it checks a lot of boxes if you're a fan of World War II history, US military history, mechanics, and gun design. It is just a really cool gun from all those perspectives. It's very easy to shoot. I can see where it would be easy to train other people to shoot. It's generally pretty accurate. I think the only con to this gun that I discovered at the range is just the sights. But that's kind of to be expected on a World War II gun. These sights aren't very big, and of course you wouldn't want to destroy this by adding some type of modern sighting system. It's just that iron sights have come a long way, and maybe that I'm getting older, these smaller sights are a little bit harder to see. I could use them just fine, but maybe I'm just more used, once again, to more modern iron sights. They worked just fine for me, but that's really only a super duper small gripe. And that's it. That's it. So as you can see, I have fallen in love with this, as I think many of you have already done in the past. The M1 Carbine is definitely a cool gun, and I still think is very relevant in today's Second Amendment community. So on my star system, how would I rate the M1 Carbine, and in this case, one made by IBM? I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It's not the most accurate gun I've ever shot. I couldn't shoot it super fast, and I wish the sights were a little bit bigger. But overall, an amazing experience. It's so cool about the history of this gun, and it's really easy to shoot. It's a lot of fun. I really can't sing its praises anymore. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. What do you think about the M1 Carbine? Do you own one? Do you collect one? And you can tell me what I missed in this review. So I look forward to seeing your comments. So, as always, thanks for watching. These bolts will not lock open after the last round, but that one just did. Why did it do that? Darn it, I got them mixed up. So let's go back to the range and see what the best group I can shoot this with at this range's furthest distance. So for this test, I'm going to be using the Hornady. Now the magazine release button is on the side, just right here by your trigger finger, and I f***ed that up.